You haven't answered a call in weeks, not because you're angry, but because you finally realized silence feels safer than disappointment. The invitation slowed down, the group chats kept moving without you, and people started whispering that you've become distant, detached, maybe even cold. But deep down, you know the truth. You didn't disappear. You simply stopped volunteering to be the background character in everyone else's story. And now the world looks at you like you're the problem. Like cutting people off was an impulsive decision or a dramatic reaction. But what if it wasn't a reaction at all? What if it was the result of years of data your mind has been quietly collecting? What if the choice to pull away wasn't about anger, but about survival? That's the psychology of people who walk away from everyone. And it's not the villain narrative people love to tell. It's a story of emotional exhaustion, learned self-protection, and a nervous system that has spent years adapting to disappointment. Because nobody wakes up one day and decides to become unreachable. That kind of transformation happens slowly, like erosion, one unmet need at a time. For most people who cut others off, the story begins long before adulthood. They grow up learning that closeness is unpredictable. Maybe love came with conditions. Maybe affection arrived only when you behaved, performed, or made yourself useful. Maybe you were praised for being strong, independent, and low maintenance, so you learned to carry your pain quietly. Over time, your nervous system started treating vulnerability as a risk rather than a connection point. Asking for help became a gamble. Expressing needs felt dangerous. So you learned to handle everything alone, not because you wanted to, but because experience taught you that dependence leads to disappointment. Psychologists call this adaptive distancing. It doesn't start from resentment. It starts from repeated emotional disconfirmation, moments where your feelings were minimized, ignored, or dismissed. Every time you opened up and someone disappeared, your brain stored the memory. It learned that emotional exposure equals pain, that connection equals effort without reciprocity, and that being easy to have around was the only way people stayed. So eventually, you stopped asking for anything. You became the reliable friend. The one who always showed up. The one who checked in even when no one checked on you. You stepped into the role of emotional anchor because that was the only way to keep relationships intact. But the moment you needed support, everything shifted. Suddenly people became busy, distant, unavailable. Their empathy had limits. Their presence had terms. And something inside you finally snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. That's when a subtle transformation began. Your mind started calculating emotional costs. Every interaction became an internal equation. How much energy am I giving? What am I receiving in return? How many times have I initiated? How many times have they? This wasn't bitterness. It was cognitive reorganization. A kind of psychological auditing your brain performs when patterns repeat long enough. Neurologically, this shift is tied to emotional fatigue, the burnout that comes from relational asymmetry. You weren't withdrawing to punish people. You were withdrawing because you realized you were participating in relationships that only existed when you carried them. And when the weight became too heavy, you stopped lifting. People called it distancing. You called it relief. From the outside, others see withdrawal. But internally, something very different is happening. Your nervous system is stabilizing. You're learning what safety feels like in the absence of emotional volatility. The quiet isn't loneliness, it's regulation. It's your mind taking a breath after years of constant vigilance. Because when your relationships are built on uncertainty, your body never truly rests. Hypervigilance doesn't always look like paranoia. Sometimes it looks like attentiveness. You start noticing shifts in tone, energy, and effort. The friend who laughs only when the conversation benefits them. The person who vanishes during hardship. The one who promises to catch up soon, but always reschedules when it isn't convenient. These aren't overreactions. They're patterns. And after enough repetition, your brain learns to predict outcomes before they occur. So instead of waiting for abandonment, you preempt it. Not out of cruelty, but out of self-protection. Many people mistake this for emotional coldness. But cutting people off rarely comes from anger. More often, it comes from grief. The grief of realizing that the people you poured yourself into were never truly standing beside you. The grief of understanding that loyalty does not guarantee reciprocity. The grief of recognizing that love without mutual investment slowly drains you. And so, you leave. Quietly. Not with dramatic exits or confrontations. Just a gradual disengagement, fewer texts, fewer explanations, fewer attempts to hold conversations together. You stop forcing connections. You stop performing emotional labor that isn't mutual. And in that silence, something unexpected happens. You begin to feel lighter. Loneliness doesn't vanish, but it becomes honest. Instead of feeling unseen in crowded rooms, you feel grounded in solitude. Instead of waiting for people to reciprocate, you stop expecting it. And instead of building your worth around how needed you are, you start reconnecting to your own internal value. This is a deeply misunderstood psychological turning point. Because isolation, in this context, doesn't mean rejection of people. It means rejection of unhealthy relational structures. It means refusing to continue participating in dynamics that drain you. It means choosing emotional integrity over social obligation. The world romanticizes community, but rarely examines the cost of staying in the wrong one. People who cut everyone off are often labeled selfish, bitter, withdrawn. But research shows that many of them are actually deeply sensitive individuals, empathic, introspective, perceptive. They didn't withdraw because they stopped caring. They withdrew because they cared too much, for too long, without being cared for in return. Their withdrawal is not indifference, it's burnout. And that burnout doesn't erase their longing for connection. It simply reshapes it. They no longer crave presence for the sake of avoiding loneliness. They crave presence that feels reciprocal, grounded, safe. They would rather be alone honestly than accompanied conditionally. This shift marks the difference between emotional isolation and intentional solitude. Isolation is desperation. Solitude is sovereignty. In solitude, they rebuild their sense of self. They reconnect with their internal world, the thoughts, emotions, interests, and dreams that were overshadowed by constant caretaking. They learn to sit with their own company without feeling abandoned. They begin to trust themselves as a reliable source of emotional stability. And slowly, they develop relational discernment. They stop tolerating inconsistency. They stop internalizing other people's emotional limitations as personal failure. They recognize when someone values convenience over commitment. And instead of rationalizing it, they step away. Not with bitterness, with boundaries. Those boundaries look like silence to others. But psychologically, they are an act of repair. A restructuring of attachment expectations. A recalibration of emotional availability. They are not closing their heart, they are reteaching it what safety means. That's why cutting people off doesn't always feel like loss. Sometimes it feels like truth. The truth that love should not require endless sacrifice. The truth that presence should not be conditional. The truth that your worth is not measured by how much you can endure. And yes, sometimes it means holidays alone, milestones unshared, moments that sting in their quietness. But even then, the silence carries dignity. It reflects a choice, a conscious refusal to beg for bare minimum affection. Because when you have spent years feeling lonely in the presence of others, solitude no longer feels like a punishment. It feels like alignment. That doesn't mean the story ends in permanent disconnection. Many people who step away eventually return to relationships, but they return differently. Slowly. Carefully. With patience for their own nervous system. With boundaries that prioritize emotional reciprocity. With a respect for their own limits. They no longer chase people. They choose people. They no longer prove their value. They honor it. And if the world interprets that choice as coldness, so be it. Because beneath the quiet, there is still hope, not the fragile, desperate hope that tries to hold on to everyone, but a steadier hope. A hope that one day, connection won't feel like risk. That loyalty won't feel one-sided. That love won't require self-betrayal. Until then, they protect the flame within them, the part that still believes in connection, but refuses to sacrifice itself to experience it. Cutting people off isn't the absence of love. It's the presence of self-preservation. It's a nervous system finally saying, no more. It's a life reclaiming itself from emotional imbalance. It's a heart stepping back not to harden, but to heal. And if you're here, sitting in that quiet, rebuilding your sense of safety one boundary at a time, you're not broken. You're becoming whole. And maybe one day, when you meet people who show up with the same steadiness you've always given, you'll open the door again, not out of fear of being alone, but out of trust that you no longer have to disappear to be loved. Until then, this season of distance isn't your ending. It's your repair.